Okay. All right. So welcome everyone. Tonight is our first episode of Let's Get Cooking at Your House. And we have several things to show you tonight. My name's Lorene Sorrow. I'm a holistic nutritionist and food professional, and my specialty is gut health. So it was more than up my alley when Carol suggested that we talk about kimchi for the first episode. So I'm very excited to do this. And with me tonight is Carol Erst. She's also a registered holistic nutritionist. Plus she also is a certified sleep science coach and a hypnotherapist, an NLP coach, and Reiki master. And she's the creator of the 12-week Let's Get You to Sleep program. So welcome, Carol. Thank you for doing this with me. Oh, Marianne says she can hear me, and she typed it in the chat. Thank you, Marianne. All right, so let's start with Carol. How did you get into, first of all, having a focus on sleep? Clearly it says in your bio that you're a reformed insomniac. So I'm assuming that had a big part in it, but you know, there were other things you could have focused on. Why did you choose sleep to focus on?
Because that was the thing that changed everything for me. I was in pretty rough shape over 10 years ago, and I had lots of health ailments, and I was actually ready to live with them. I didn't really concern myself. I had weight issues and osteoarthritis, painful knees, and Hashimoto's and all kinds of stuff. But it was the fact that I couldn't get to sleep that drove me insane. And when I did get to sleep, when I finally figured out how to get to sleep, everything else in my body started to work better as well. So it was actually the catalyst that actually moved me.
Well, that makes a lot of sense based on what I've read about sleep. I do think it should be a priority for people based on, you know, my own experience, your experience, many of our friends and family, what they talk about, our colleagues. It's a big topic right now because people are having trouble sleeping, and it's not just about getting to sleep, it's also about staying asleep and, you know, the quality of the sleep and things like that. So I think it's a fascinating topic, but what I'd like to hear is your take on gut health and sleep, and then in particular, kimchi.
Yes. Yeah, do you want me to explain that connection? Or?
Sure, I do.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I was going to put this away. Yes, I was actually quite fascinated by it myself as well, because when you think about this, well, first of all, when people can't sleep, they don't think that food has a relationship with it. You know, they think there's something else going on in the body. And really not being able to sleep is actually a symptom of something out of balance in the body. And one of the first places one should look is actually in your gut, mostly because a lot of people who don't sleep, it's either hormonal imbalances or stress, which are both tied in together. So studies have shown that even one night of bad sleep can change your gut bacteria in your stomach. So even one bad night's sleep can do that to you. So if you can imagine having chronic stress, and of course, chronic stress leads to no sleep, and no sleep leads to chronic stress. So it's this round and round circle. You can just imagine the state of your microbiome. If one night can do some damage, then a whole lot of damage can happen over a period of time of chronic stress. So getting to that is really, really one of the first places to start, because a lot of our hormones and neurotransmitters are actually made in our gut, or at least the receptor sites are there, and they're the ones that are important for sleep. So I think most people know about serotonin, and serotonin is, you know, that feel-good hormone, and the lack of that can make somebody depressed or anxious and no sleep. And the same with other hormones, neurotransmitters like GABA and melatonin, all have a relationship in the gut. So if you don't have a healthy gut and you can't make these hormones or neurotransmitters, there's no way in heck you're ever going to be able to sleep.
Well, and that makes perfect sense. And it certainly backs up what you're saying is, I've read several things about sleep and the microbiome and how it's a synergistic relationship. You can't have one without the other. In terms of kimchi, I actually came across a study that talked about kimchi specifically lowering cortisol levels, which would also tie into what you just said, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and again, is there a study that says kimchi helps you with sleep? No. You have to know what sleep needs from A, the microbiome, and B, other things that play a role inside the body that kimchi can help with. So there's an awful lot of research right now on kimchi in particular. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, because with regard to research, there's two ways to look at it. One is, are you, looking at helping your overall microbiome health and you're not worrying too much about the specifics? Because if you're doing different recipes with kimchi, they don't all have the same ingredients, and therefore they don't have all the same beneficial bacteria. It's going to vary based on the foods that are used. But that doesn't mean it's not helping, because anything that helps the microbiome overall is going to be helping with it, or whatever specific thing you're trying to help with, in this case, sleep. So it's tricky because there's so many different types of recipes for kimchi, right, Carol?
Absolutely. It's your own creation too, right?
Exactly. And that's one of the things we want to encourage is, if you don't like the way we make it, and altering it with a different ingredient here or there or whatever, be our guest, because it's more about you pleasing your palate so that you have something like this in your diet than it is so much about the specific recipe. But what we will be talking about tonight is what we feel are the key ingredients that would result in it being called kimchi. And this is based on just looking at various recipes plus our own. There's a certain set of ingredients that seem to be common to them all. And then you have flexibility as to how you use them. So I'm going to start by showing you how to make a basic kimchi, because Carol's is very interesting. I've never heard of this before, this method, and it was quite interesting to me, but we'll let her explain that when we get there. I'm just going to show you the basic kimchi that I make, and it's pretty easy and straightforward. So the first thing you have to do with any kimchi, and this also goes for other types of cultured vegetables. This is my Himalayan sea salt, which is what I use to make a brine. So you need some water, non-chlorinated. So if you have spring water, great. If you have like a Berkey filter or something that filters out the chlorine, great. If not, you can just boil the water to get rid of the chlorine, and then let it cool down a bit before you add the salt or put it onto the vegetable. And all you have to do, I've got 2 cups of water here, and I'm going to add about a tablespoon and a half of sea salt. And I know that is a lot. It is. Kimchi is salty, which is going to prove kind of interesting with one of the other kimchis we're going to be talking about later, because it kind of counters that saltiness a bit, doesn't it, Carol?
It does.
It does, and we quite like it. So we just stir this up. It doesn't have to be that well stirred. So the purpose of the salt, of course, is to allow you to have the bad bacteria not grow while good bacteria does grow. And I'll explain that in a minute. But there's nothing really to my method. All you have to do is chop up some vegetables. So I've got a carrot here. And you can just, however you want the pieces. And we're not gonna chop everything tonight. Some of it's already prepared, but we thought we should at least show you one chopping. So I'm doing the chopping. All right, so we're gonna do the carrot. Again, piece size doesn't have to matter. And you just throw it into a jar, right? So there's our jar. And then I've got a green onion. Whoops. You notice I didn't peel my carrot. I don't peel my carrots unless I have to.
It's interesting, Laureen, because I actually do peel my carrots, even though I buy organic carrots. And I think that's because one time I made our just fermented carrots and it all went moldy. So ever since then, I've been a little, oh, I think I better peel them. So I have to get over that, I think.
Well, and you have to, again, you can buy carrots that are on their way to not being good carrots when you buy them, unfortunately, especially organic, because if the turnaround isn't good, it would depend what time of the year it was as well. And I look at them. If they're dirty, I wash them, but I don't peel them. And again, if it was already starting to go, that could happen. But most of the time when we buy carrots, it's not the case. Most of the time they're in good shape. And could there be some residues left over from the soil? Possibly. Could be some little trace minerals, a little bit of dirt, whatever. Not anything you can taste, no grit, nothing like that. And that's not a bad thing. So that's why I don't peel them. But if they are visibly dirty or, anything like that, I definitely wash them. And
yeah, I did wash them. But anyway, I think,
if they're already going, which you couldn't tell necessarily, if there was mold already, like sometimes it's not visible. Okay, so then the other thing we got here, before I put the cabbage in, because it's going to go in last, I got part of a daikon radish, and that's pretty traditional as well. You don't have to put a daikon in, and I do peel the daikon because it looks strange to me. It's funny how an unpeeled carrot does not look strange, but.
And I don't peel the daikon.
There we go. You have your freedom here to do as you please. All right, and I'm just gonna cut off a bit of this and put it into some slices. And I will toss those in. Get in there. Then we're going to put in some ginger, and Carol's going to show us a really cool technique to peel ginger, but I'm going to do it the hard way. Just to peel it with a knife, you lose half the ginger. And I'm just showing this to you for, so you have different techniques and stuff, but I think you're going to like Carol's technique.
Sometimes I'll take, if I hack off the ginger too much, I'll make a tea with the leftovers.
Well, that's a good idea.
Actually, and that's also what I do with the carrot peels. I don't throw them out. I actually put them in the freezer and save them for making vegetable stock. So I don't throw it out.
So the recipes for these, if you click just below the video, or sorry, the stream here, you'll see there's a link to the website page, and all the recipes are on there so that you can get the proportions. Again, the proportions are not that critical, other than getting enough salt in the water. That's about the most critical thing, which I'll explain when we get to that stage. So I'm throwing in my ginger, and now I'm going to throw in the garlic. So I just take my knife and I squish the garlic. Some people might chop this loosely. Again, Carol has another method she's going to show you, which is really cool too. It's a cool little gadget. And you take the paper off. If the paper likes to come off. This is the only thing I don't like about garlic, is the getting the paper off.
Yes.
And the fresher it is, the harder it is to peel the paper off.
I once watched somebody demonstrate where they put garlic into a bowl and with a lid and shook it really hard for, like 30 seconds or 45 seconds. And they opened up and all the peel fell off. So of course I tried that method at home and it didn't work. So I figure it must be, because I noticed different types of garlic are easier to peel than others. So.
Well, I think it's an age thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the older it is. So again, I just put mine in a garlic crush because I'm lazy. And so there goes in the garlic. And then I am adding horseradish. And I think that's a little strange. I don't always add horseradish, but we bought some at an Asian market recently, and I could taste the horseradish, and it tasted really cool, and my niece really liked it. So, and I really like horseradish this way. I like the, I don't like it in the jar with the vinegar, but I do like the fresh horseradish. And you can see it's a big, big thing here. Can't get it all the time. It's not year-round available, but you peel it as well. And you just grate it up as you see fit. And of course, this is going to make my eyes water. As soon as you start grating horseradish, your eyes water. You don't even have to.
So it's like onions. Like onions.
Oh, yeah. And you can smell it. Like it smells really good. All right. So I'm just going to throw in the horseradish. And now I can add the rest with cabbage. So I got Chinese cabbage here. And how big the pieces are up to you. If you've ever bought kimchi, sometimes they're big, long pieces. Sometimes they're small pieces. It's whatever you prefer. And the key is you want to pack the vegetables in. Okay, you want to have them as nice and tight inside the jar as possible. So you just push them in and push them down like this. Okay, and you want to leave about 1 inch of space in the jar at the top. And then you can, this is the brine that I prepared earlier. You just add the brine water to cover the vegetables. Get them in there. And then if you want, you can add chili peppers that you chop up. I think, Carol, you're going to show, or red peppers or jalapenos. You've got a number of things you're going to show, but you could use red pepper powder if you wanted to as well to give it some heat. You don't have to put this in. It's optional. You call it blonde kimchi when you don't add the heat. But I like a little bit of heat. And I just throw it in on top. And then we're down to the key thing we need to do. So we're going to poke that in there. And you saw me using my hands, which may or may not thrill people. But a friend of mine whose husband was in Korea was staying with a family, and they were making a big batch of kimchi like they typically do. And their tradition, along with where they live, the tradition was that every family member puts their hand in the kimchi to give it its own unique flavor. And we're kind of phobic about what's on our hands, but actually we have a lot of beneficial bacteria on our hands. It's not something we should be afraid of. You know, you just wash your hand before you wash. You know, you're not, you know, you obviously practice reasonable hygiene. And but this is a very important part of cooking, I believe, is to use your hands. But it's up to you. If you don't want to, you don't have to do that either. So we've got everything in here, and we're going to put the lid on. Okay, so this is the trick. This is the key part. So we have this inch of space in here, and as you can see, I don't know how well you can see that, but there's little bits of vegetable poking up. That is not a good thing. This is an anaerobic process. It needs to ferment without oxygen. And therefore, we have to create a vacuum inside the jar. And this will happen during the first 3 to 4 days of fermentation. So what happens is that a bacteria called Leukenstock mesentoides builds up first before the other beneficial bacteria. It creates carbon dioxide. Once it produces the carbon dioxide, it creates a vacuum inside that empty space, and therefore mold and pathogenic bacteria cannot grow. So, but in the meantime, any vegetables that are poking above this water line are vulnerable. So all I do is a nice little trick is once a day, or sometimes twice if I feel like it, I turn it upside down like this so that they get covered with some of the brine at some point during the day. And then I flip it back over. And you only have to do this for 3-4 days, and then you don't have to do it anymore. And this will ferment for about 2 weeks. So that's my basic kimchi. So again, very simple, easy to do, and that's the way I've been doing. Now we're going to hear another method from Carol. So Carol, tell us about your kimchi.
I think mine is far too complicated.
No, but that makes it cool and interesting.
Now I'm going to have to change the camera angle so that you can see what I've got going on over here. I start off by making a chili garlic paste. So this is the finished product of a chili garlic paste, and it also ferments. And so I keep it in the fridge. This is probably made about 2 months ago when I made the last batch. So to actually make the chili garlic paste, you chop up a whole bunch of garlic, and then you dehydrate some, I don't know if you can see that, some peppers in hot water. It says to just add a couple of teaspoons, like to sieve it out and to add the water later. But I always end up adding all the water anyways. So I just dump the whole thing in. It also, the recipe, I never really follow recipes, but the recipe does ask for sugar, but I don't want to add sugar. So I just add an extra tablespoon of salt. So you add 2 tablespoons of salt and 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. They also recommend fish sauce, but I don't have nice quality fish sauce, so I don't add it, which is probably why I add the extra little water. And then I take it over to the mixer over here, which I'm not going to do, but then you mix it all up and it turns it into a little bit of paste. You put it in the jar. You sit it on the counter for a couple of days and let it ferment, and then you put it in the fridge, and that is the sauce. Now, to make the kimchi, again, I do it differently, and because my husband eats kimchi a lot, I have to make lots of it. So I make big batches. So what I do is I actually take the cabbage and cut it up, and I salt it. And salting helps to soften, I hope everybody can see that, soften the cabbage. I'm also using bok choy, and I've also salted that. And then, of course, you rinse it off. And then I just, chop it as you like. Want it big or small. And then I put everything into the bowl. I got a lot here to chop up. Again, you can have it nice and chunks or smaller ones, doesn't really matter. And then I will add in all the extra little stuff. This time I change it up, what I add into the kimchi. I don't, mostly because when I go to the market, they don't have what I'm looking for. So sometimes I will add Jerusalem artichokes. And if you're not familiar what a Jerusalem artichoke looks like, kind of ugly looking. If you can see, this is what a Jerusalem artichoke looks like. But they actually kind of taste a little bit like a potato. You can actually kind of cook them like a potato too, bake them. They're kind of really creamy when they're baked. But they're really good prebiotic food, which is something you want to have. So the kimchi is a probiotic food, but you're using prebiotic food for it. And prebiotic food is food that helps feed your good gut bacteria. So I'm not going to spend all the time chopping. I'll just show you how I put it all together. Throw in, I cut up the Jerusalem artichokes, throw them in. I also sliced up my carrots, throw them in. Green onions, throw them in. And I also have a daikon radish, which I will also chop as well. I like them a little bit smaller and thinner. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's hard to tell with the angle of the camera. Doesn't really matter because it all gets all mixed up in there anyways. And then I'm going to show you a really handy little gadget that helps with cutting up garlic. Now, I like what Laureen did with the garlic. You just put it through the garlic press. It's easy, but I really like garlic, and I actually like to see the garlic in there. So I have this fancy little gizmo from the Pampered Chef. And you just put the garlic in here. Too thick, you just cut it. And then you just turn it. And out come these lovely thin slices. People can see that, thin slices of garlic. And it's really easy to do. You can actually just do it over the bowl. So you can get it all in there. Well, like I said, I love lots of garlic, so I'll put lots of garlic in there. And then, of course, ginger. And I'll just show you another really interesting way to peel ginger. It's quite easy just to, take a knife and slice off the pieces. But I saw somebody demonstrate this, and I thought it was quite interesting, that if you take a spoon, now let me just see if I get the camera angle here right. And so you have your ginger and you have a spoon, and all you do is just, with the back of the spoon, press there, and voila, you've actually peeled your ginger without, see the little peel, without taking off much of the ginger. So that's kind of really nice way to do it. And it gets into those little nooks and crannies that are hard to do with a knife. And then I'm going to add, add in the ginger. And then I'm going to add in the sauce. Mix it all up. And of course, I also have the brine made right here. Pour it in here, because I find that when you pour it into the kimchi, it also helps to mix up the sauce. And so it gets everything nice and even throughout the entire thing. So you can see what it looks like. I hope you can see it like that. And then what I do is I then do exactly what Laureen did, is I get a jar and I put it into the jar. I haven't finished making it, so I won't do it just yet. And then when it's in the jar, I put it the lid on it, and I leave it on the counter for 5-6 days depending. And yes, leave space, because I have left it where I didn't leave space, and I had stuff gurgling everywhere and overspilling when I opened it up. So be mindful of that. And also, I've never turned it over, so I think that's a neat little trick that Laureen taught, is turning it over. I actually open it up and press it down. But now that I've seen Laureen use her hands, I'm actually thinking maybe I'll use my hands next time rather than just using the spoon. So that's my little quick demo of how I do the kimchi. Are you there, Laureen?
Yes, I am. The reason I find it so interesting, okay, so the way that I demoed it is, first of all, let me just answer a question here. Melanie's asking if the metal lids rust. After several uses, yes, they do, and the lids are easy to replace. So, eventually I just replace the lid, but keep the jar. But yeah, I get multiple uses out of a lid, so. And so the reason I find what Carol's doing is so interesting. All right, so with my method, the bacteria has to start from scratch, right? With Carol's method, she's giving it a bit of a starter. So in other words, the fermentation that occurred with the chili peppers is, because she fermented it a bit, is actually giving a jump start, which may mean, and I don't know if you've experimented with this, Carol, that you could use less salt. Because like if you use, for example, whey, which is drained from yogurt, as a starter in cultured vegetables, you don't have to use as much salt. Now there's a downside to that too, but not so much in this case, but if you were using yogurt, it is, because you're then using yogurt bacteria strains, which would be different, and you're actually giving them the advantage, say if you were doing cultured carrots or something like that, you're giving them the advantage. But since this already would have been fermenting as one of the ingredients in kimchi anyway, I don't think that that would occur with this method. So I think that's a really cool tip. So it may be a little of an extra step, but I think it's worthwhile in the overall picture of, you know, allowing you to have a little more freedom with how you play with the ingredients, including the salt. I don't know if have you ever experimented, Carol, with
To be honest, I do put less salt in, just naturally, just because I like to put less salt in. I don't put as much as they say.
Well, I think that that makes a big difference with that technique that you have there with regard to fermenting it first. Where did you learn about that?
Oh yeah, good point. I have the book right here. It's called Mastering Fermentation.
Excellent. There's another question. Can we use the plastic lids that are designed for mason jars and still have the desired outcome? You should be able to, as long as it's a fairly tight seal, because it's really hard for the carbon dioxide to build up if it isn't a tight seal. It doesn't have to be an airtight seal in any way, shape, or form, because as that carbon dioxide builds up, it's actually going to suck that lid right on tight, so that if you've ever had a fermented food that you made and you didn't open it, you know, when it was ready, and you tried to open it, say a month later, you could barely get it off because it's just, the gas is so built up in there, it's not coming off. So you could do that. So you should be able to do that, and that would avoid any rust problems. But it is plastic, and I was just reading an article this week. You're not going to like this. Just reading an article this week about how plastics and some of the residue ends up in foods when we use them. I don't think much would happen with a lid, but you know, if you're concerned with that sort of thing and the chemicals that are in the plastic, you may not want to use the plastic lid, but it's, again, it's a personal choice, and it will, they're going to be reusable almost indefinitely unless you do something like crack them or something like that. So. Who is the author of Carol's book? Who's the author of that fermentation book?
Mary Carlin, Karlin.
All right. Oh, okay. So that's what I thought was, I just think that's a fascinating way to do it. And so I thought it was worth us hearing about that and Carol showing us this. The next kimchi we're going to do, I'm just doing a quick broccoli and sweet bell pepper kimchi, right? So we're going to get to why they're all kimchi shortly. We'll get around to that. But I was chopping while Carol was making hers. And so as you can see, I just have a nice jar here. I've got broccoli, and I put the pieces in fairly small because broccoli is a little harder than a red pepper, so I wanted them to sort of ferment a little more evenly. I've got some strips of red pepper, and I've got pieces of white onion. So I usually use white onion, not green onions. And so I've got that in there. Plus I put in the ginger. Now I'm putting in the garlic. And if I wanted to, I could add the red pepper powder, or I could add, I have chili peppers. I could cut them up and put little pieces in like that. Whatever you want to do, or you could leave it as is. And then again, it's the exact same process as before. You pour in the brine. Cover the vegetables. Give them a poke down. So why would you want to do this? Anybody have any ideas why you might want to do this instead of making it with cabbage and daikon and things that are traditionally used? Is there any advantages to this? Can anybody think? Just type in the chat if you have any ideas why we might want to do this. I know why I want to do it, but I don't know why you would want to do it, but I want to do it. Why do you think we might want to do that? And Carol actually had a suggestion of cauliflower, which would be really nice, right? Doing a cauliflower one with some other vegetables as well. And you're probably saying, but it's broccoli and sweet red peppers. What does that got to do with kimchi? Ah, that's the big question. So far, nobody's answering me, but I don't know if that's because of the delay or what. Oh, here we go.
Probably the delay, or maybe why would you do that? They're confused.
No, they're not confused. This is a good group. Luana says, different nutrients and variety. Yes, that is true. So every food feeds different strains of good bacteria. So broccoli and sweet red peppers are going to develop different diversity of strains than, say, the cabbage and the daikon would do, or whatever, right? And Kathy says, tastes good. Yes, if you like broccoli and sweet peppers, which I do, I like them a lot better than I like cabbage and daikon. I don't mind cabbage. Daikon is okay, but it's kind of bland. Melanie also had the variety of vegetables. Morella says because of the sulforaphane, well, the cabbage has sulforaphane in it too. Remember, they're both from the cruciferous vegetable family. So they make, same with cauliflower, they make good substitutes for one another. And Darius says, every vegetable has different phytonutrients and bacteria. That is correct. And Melanie says, yes, I fermented cauliflower with salt water mixture. Texture was interesting. Yeah, the texture, depending on how long you ferment, the longer you ferment, the softer it will get. So Carol's fermenting for about, you said 5 days?
On the counter, yeah.
Yeah, I ferment for 2 weeks. And either way, or anything in between is fine. You're free to do what works for you. She has to make it every week because her husband eats it all the time. So I don't have to make it every week, so I can let it ferment for 2 weeks if I like.
But Maureen, it still ferments once it's in the fridge too.
It does, but it does slow down a bit.
Yeah.
So traditional Chinese wisdom is saying, can you get sick if something goes wrong with fermentation prior to eat, example, veggies above the brine? Well, okay, so if the vegetables are above the brine and you don't do this for the first 3 days, and this is why I like to do it for 2 weeks, because you can really see this. Then as it ferments, you'll start to see the mold form on top. And if you are, and I know of some sites online that says, oh, you just scrape the mold off and it's fine. No, if you see mold, no, it's done, it's over, it's wrecked. Don't do it. And one of the things that might be happening, so you have to be careful when you open the jar. Don't do that frequently either, because you're going to let the gas out once the gas builds up. So when you're fermenting it for 3, 4, 5 days, it has less opportunity to build any mold. But when you're fermenting it for 2 weeks, you have a lot of opportunity. So I don't generally open this jar once it's after the first day. Sometimes I open it up again to keep poking at it if I feel like it. But once I've got it, sitting for 24 hours, I don't open it up again until after I'm past the 4 to 5 day mark. And usually I don't even open it up again at all. And because I like to see that nice gas pop when I open up the jar. So it's very safe. It's very, very safe. And as long as you follow the rules, you're not going to have an issue. Shannon is saying, for a variety of nutrients, color, that is correct. How long does it last in the fridge? For eons. It's like sauerkraut or anything else, it lasts months. So once fermented, I have a little jar of tomatoes somewhere. I don't know if I can put my hands on it quickly. There it is. Okay. See this jar of tomatoes? That is at least 7 years old. So, and I've opened it up from time to time and it's absolutely fine. Because of, once this is, the good bacteria is in charge, it's not going anywhere. And so it will keep everything fermented, and bad bacteria and mold can't grow in that environment. In the fridge, I've left things up to a year, never a problem. and if you've ever had sauerkraut that you don't finish, see, you probably buy sauerkraut and eat it and finish it, right? Like normal people do. I don't necessarily do that. I have to be in a sauerkraut mood. So I can have sauerkraut in my fridge for months, and then I'll go through a couple of jars fairly quickly, but when I get into the mood. So it lasts indefinitely because what happens is this is going to slow down the fermentation process. But this is now an acid. If you put a piece, once it's fermented, if you put a piece of pH paper in it, it would be around 4 on the pH scale, which means bacteria is not going to grow. And so it's very safe. Does making kimchi promote any bacteria in your kitchen to help with other ferments? Similar to way keeping sourdough helps build up wild yeast. Generally speaking, one type of fermented food should not be too close to another type. They can. Not generally with this type because there's a lid on it. Whereas sourdough, you don't put a lid on it. It's usually got a cloth of some kind or something like that. And that, because it needs oxygen. Sourdough needs oxygen. Kefir from the kefir grains needs oxygen. Kombucha needs oxygen. So they generally can cross the strains, which is not a good thing. This, not likely because of the lid. Okay, and we don't want wild yeast in this type of fermentation. That's strictly for kombucha, kefir, water kefir, and sourdough. So for sauerkraut, any of the cultured vegetables, kimchi, you want an anaerobic environment and no oxygen because there are no yeast strains in it when it's done. All right, so Carol.
Yes.
Would you like to show us the delicious, fabulous fruit kimchi?
Yes. I'm just going to get the samples out of my fridge here. This next kimchi is something I just started making, and I think it's now my favorite. Now I need to get that bowl cleaned again. Actually, I'll just the bowl. And this is a fruit kimchi. Much easier to make than my version of the regular kimchi. So here is what it looks like after it's made. It's too bad you aren't here to have a sample of it because I think that's when it really shines. So you can use any fruit you want, but I've been following the recipe pretty closely, and I do that always in the beginning of recipes until I decide how to change it. So I only changed one thing. So again, I'm using out of a book. This is Wild Fermentation by Sander Katz. He's, pretty good authority on all things fermenting. And so we start with some pineapple. See there, so throw in the pineapple. And we have also chopped onions. Of course, the garlic. Sorry, this one's the ginger. And, oh yeah, this is something new. He suggested plums, but when I tasted it, I went, oh, I feel like mango, so I'm putting mangoes in. That, and of course, he says a bunch of grapes. I don't know how much a bunch of grapes is, and you don't need to chop them, so just throw a bunch of grapes in. And of course, all that lovely sliced garlic, lots of it, because I love garlic. And now the other stuff I haven't chopped yet, so I'll have to go quickly on that. This is a pear and an apple. Also interesting that and I'm also not peeling this too, by the way. I'll also keep the peel in. The other ingredients that I thought was kind of weird is, but why not, cashews. So, or he said you can use any nuts, but half a cup of cashews and coriander. So throw in some coriander. And then I'll just chop up pears and apple. And then you also throw in, of course, some chopped chilies. And of course, I chopped these much earlier today because I had to wear gloves. Anybody who's ever chopped chilies knows it's not a good idea to chop them with your bare hands. I actually did it the other day when I made the first batch of the fruit kimchi, and my hands stung for hours. So yeah, even though you know better, you still don't do it right. And then you put the pear and the apple in. And this is actually a faster ferment too. It doesn't take that long to ferment. It's good in about 5 days, I think he says. And this is the one where he also said, every day go in, open it up, and press it down with your own hands. He likes that tactile feel of touching the kimchi. So I haven't done that. I admit I use a spoon, but I think in this batch, I'm going to use my hands. I'm going to see, create some new bacteria. See what happens. Okay, so there goes the pear. I'll put the apple in later. And then, of course, the juice of 1 lemon. And that is everything. Yes, that is it all. And so there's no brine in here either. And so I'll continue to chopping the apple. And what I'll do is put it in the jar. And when I put it in the jar, you have to press it down because it creates its own liquid, and to try and get the liquid to come up over it. And I also put a little glass jar in there to press it down so that it stays below the brine. So I'm just going to do the apple now. If there's anything you want to talk about, Maureen?
Well, it's interesting because you were doing this. I just thought, well, let me first answer some questions here and then I'll. Okay. Really saying, curious what you put your fruit kimchi on.
Oh, yeah. I heated it right out of the bowl. However, we were talking about that, and I think it would be really lovely on chicken or fish.
I think you compared it to salsa.
Yes, actually, yeah. If I was to say what it reminded me of salsa. That's probably the coriander doing it. I don't know, any other thoughts? I know, the vegetable kimchi, there's certainly a lot of places that goes on.
Well, yeah, I try to put the regular kimchi on things that, like I find it goes really well with tomato, it goes well with rice. There's a lot of things that really sort of, it enhances the flavor of, and the other things enhance the flavor of it. But the fruit one has me very interested, and so I made one too. I didn't pay much attention to the recipe that Carol gave me, and I probably should have. So I just made it the same way that I just made the other two things, where this is my fruit kimchi, and it'll help me answer your question, Joanne. So I have in here plums, pineapple, strawberries, and mango.
Ooh, yum.
And I put in garlic, ginger, onion. Did I put onion in here? No, I didn't put any onion in. Garlic, ginger, and red chili pepper. So I sliced open the peppers and took the seeds out and just chopped them up. And I used 2 frozen fruits and 2 fresh. Not partly because I was just doing this so that when Carol's talking about it, I had something to compare to because I hadn't tried it myself. And I only had fresh. I had fresh mango, and I had some plums that I bought particularly to do this. And I waited until they ripened, and they were the most tasteless plums I've ever had in my life. They were so, like, just there was nothing there, and they were very ripe. So to answer your question, Joanne, no, I wouldn't use unripe fruit. But then the pineapple, so I decided, you know what, the frozen pineapple I know has flavor, and I know those fresh strawberries, the smell when I open the bag is just amazing. I'm putting those in, and then I had the fresh mango. So that's what I ended up using, and it's very tasty. And there's more to this story. I know, how are you doing there with your? You say you don't use a brine? I used a brine.
Yeah, they didn't. There's no brine, and so this is no brine, and it was just the juice from it. However, if it's not, this one's pretty dry, so I'll add a little bit of water to it.
So the thing
about, maybe it should have some brine in it.
Well, the thing about fruit is that if you leave it too long to ferment, so she was saying it's like 3 to 5 days, it can turn into alcohol, right? That's the problem with fermenting fruit. So it just made sense to me to add the brine, because I was trying to go for something that's a cross between sweet and savory. And because that's my favorite combination of flavors. I love sweet and savory. You know, if it's salty, put some sweet and some sour into it. So the fermentation process makes it sour normally, and then adding some sweet. And the reason we sort of got on this topic was because of this lovely rhubarb kimchi that I did. I thought that was going to taste really interesting, because I love rhubarb, but of course I love sweet rhubarb, and this doesn't have any sugar in it. So I was very shocked when I tasted it that it actually just tastes like kimchi. You get a little bit of a rhubarb taste to it, but that's it. So when Carol was telling about the fruit kimchi, I thought maybe that's what's going to give me that sweet, sour, you know, salty kind of combination that I really, really like. And so that's kind of why I use the brine. So you usually have more juice, or you're just adding water there now to give it?
I just added a bit of brine because it was too dry. And oh yeah, now I maybe added a bit too much. It's quite juicy. And I'll just put this thing on top of it and just press it down. And give it its lid. And like I said, I open mine every day to press it down. But I don't know that I'll do that now. Maybe I'll wait and see. Anyway, so there's some liquid in there. So it looks good. And there's also, this is my rhubarb kimchi as well.
And hers came out a different color than mine, but it does fade. They all fade in color as they ferment. So they're not as colorful as they are when you first put them in the jar.
Yeah, you know, sometimes the rhubarb, there's a lot of green ends to them. And this is my regular kimchi. So this is, you know, the consistency of it, what it looks like. So I've chopped it up a lot smaller than this one. Anyway.
Now, just to answer one other part of the question about what to do with this, I have some yogurt cream cheese here, and I think mixing that in with this fruit kimchi will be to die for. So I have it set up. It's draining the whey out. If you've never seen this or done this, this is a great way to have something nice and creamy, but still has lots of beneficial bacteria, and it has no chemicals in it like cream cheese does, unless you get a very natural cream cheese. So that's what I'm going to do with this fruit kimchi. Now, Glenda has a question. Would love to hear about how this helps with sleep. Well, we talked about that at the beginning, but essentially what we're trying to establish here with regards to sleep, we talked about the study where it lowers cortisol, which of course is going to help sleep. And then of course, because it's helping the microbiome, and the microbiome is essential for good sleep, and good sleep is essential for a healthy microbiome. That's how kimchi helps with sleep. But we went into a little more detail about that at the beginning.
And also to help your GABA production, fermented foods is really important as well.
Exactly, absolutely. There's a question for you, Carol. Carol, it says, why does Carol put a little jar in her big jar?
Oh, that's to keep the liquid up. So it's like a weight pressing it down. So because there wasn't a lot of liquid in there, and I want to push the liquid up so that it will go below the liquid line and it doesn't go moldy.
That's what I do with my sauerkraut. So that's a good technique too. And then you don't have to, do this. It just stays below the water line. Kathy is saying, now I know what to do with the frozen rhubarb that's been lurking in my freezer for a few years. Sure. I actually put a few dates in mine, and I put in some onion. Like, I did try to go towards the savory side, but knowing that I like sweeter rhubarb, I thought I'll add dates. That'll make it taste good. No, it still tastes like kimchi. Which brings us to the big question. What makes kimchi taste like kimchi? Which, of course, is, from what I can tell, because when I eat the broccoli one, or I'm sure when Carol eats her kimchi, or I eat my kimchi, and even this one, there is a bit of the sweet there that isn't typically there, but it's the garlic, the ginger, the onion, and the red pepper, whatever form you're using it in, or if you're going to use jalapeno, any of that, whatever is going to give it the heat. It seems that when you ferment that, those two together, it gives it that kimchi taste. And that's what basically seems to be common to almost every kimchi. Morella's saying, could you actually use frozen vegetables for fermentation? You can, but the problem is with a frozen vegetable, and I was a little leery about this with regard to the frozen fruit, but frozen fruit going a little mushy isn't that bad, because we often cook fruit anyway and it goes all mushy. But with vegetables, when they've been frozen, they are mushy when they're thawed. And one of the nice things about fermentation is that these won't go soft unless you really ferment them a long time. So, you know, when I open this up, it's still crunchy. Same with the broccoli and the red pepper. I'm sure you find the same thing, Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the only downside to frozen vegetables. You know, I mean, obviously it's better if they're fresh, but if you had stuff and you wanted to do something with them and get them out of your freezer, you could do that.
One of the things I wanted to mention about the rhubarb kimchi, I love rhubarb and I love the tartness. So I'll actually stew the rhubarb without sugar and then just throw that on my yogurt. But I know that it's also a prebiotic food, but if you cook your prebiotic food, it's not so prebiotic. So by making kimchi with it, then it's even more prebiotic, right?
Well, the jury's still out on that one.
Okay.
Yes, the fibers do break down, but they actually aren't so they aren't consumed. So when bacteria consumes the fiber in the prebiotic foods, it's like literally breaking it down into different compounds. Whereas when you're cooking it, you're just kind of breaking the bonds, but you're not actually digesting it. Bacteria digests when it ferments. And so there's still food for the good bacteria to eat.
Okay.
You don't have to be as worried about it as you might think. Again, this is about making it the way you're going to actually consume it. So if you're a raw veggie person, go for it. If you're a cooked veggie person, go for it. Just be sure that you are, you know, consuming as many different types as you possibly can. Okay, so Melanie is answering Judy's question. Thank you, Melanie. All right, so that's our little episode. I'm sorry we got off to a rough start. This YouTube thing is a little finicky. If you try to click in before the time, it messes it all up. It wants it to be 8 o'clock on the dot before you even try to go live. And that's why I was trying to just not go live before 8, but just get in there ready to go live, and it didn't like that. So then I had to figure out why it was misbehaving. And I do think there was a little glitch in YouTube too, because I've never seen it say live stream is not available. So that's usually a YouTube thing. But fortunately, it behaved itself eventually and we got on. Carolyn's saying it looks delicious. And Ren is saying, have you ever added some tomato paste to kimchi? Some seem to have a thicker sauce and I'd like that. So I'm thinking tomato paste. You could add that if you like. There's no problem with that. You could add tomatoes to it if you like. It could be the canned or stewed diced tomatoes. That's what's in this lovely little jar. They weren't even fresh tomatoes. You can put fresh tomatoes in. Again, when you're trying to please your palate, you get to do what you like. And overall, it's going to have a beneficial effect as long as it's fermented properly. All right, so I don't know if you have any more questions, and I don't know because there's this delay on there. And but next week we're gonna have another episode, and it's with Glenda Britton, and it's going to be called Different Diets, One Household. So Glenda will be sharing with us how she has coped in the last 3 months feeding 6 adults, 3 different types of diets. And she's kind of mastered the do it once and make one meal to please everyone standard. And so we're going to talk a little bit about not only is this important for helping the family or the household have all the foods and nutrients that they need throughout the day to keep them healthy and, you know, to support their immune system, which of course is a concern for us all right now. But also we're going to talk about mental health, because that's a concern right now with people who've been, you know, locked in, they're not locked in their house, but, you know, they've been on lockdown in their house. There's a lot of anxiety. And so we're going to have a conversation about that next week. Do I have a study on sleep and kimchi? I have the study on cortisol and kimchi, which again, if you lower your cortisol levels, it helps you sleep, because most people don't sleep because of their high cortisol levels. I'm going to send out a replay if you're on the email list. If you're not, you can email me at info@thedigestorsdilemma.com, and I can send that to you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. This is kind of strange because I have to look at the camera here, but the questions are over there and Carol's way over there. Carol's in a little tiny box for me, like this big. I haven't been able to see what Carol was doing the whole time because she's in a little tiny box and I'm in a little tiny box. It's just something I have to get used to. Carol, do you have any last thoughts that you would like to share?
Oh, yeah, I don't think people need to fear kimchi. You know, it really is an easy thing to do. And don't get hung up if you can't find it in the grocery store. Just, you can use anything. And that's how, you know, some of my better kimchis came about, was because I couldn't find this, so let's try this.
Excellent. Good suggestion, because I think we do get a little hung up on our recipes sometimes, that if we can't get the ingredients we always use, we don't want to make it. And as you said, half the time you discover something new that you like even better because you had to go outside the box and try a different fruit or vegetable in something. And I think that's a lot of fun. All right. Well, thank you very much, Carol.
Well, thank you for letting me be on your first episode. I loved it.
Well, thank you. You did a great job, and I really appreciate everything you had to say. I think it brings a lot of different insights into this topic. Sorry, I'm trying to find the...
And there's more than one way to make a kimchi.
That is correct. All right. Good night, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.